Hi, welcome to Fast Talks. Today we have our guest Haley. She's here to talk with us about drawing people in. So tell us more about yourself, Haley.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. So, I am a business coach and community building mentor. I actually spent about 20 years in the corporate space, which for you probably feels like an eternity. But I worked for about 20 years in the corporate space in leadership in all different capacities and became an entrepreneur a couple of years ago. And now I'm a business coach. So, I help other business owners create expansion within their business by leveraging community and purpose driven relationships. And then I also am the co founder of a community locally here in Arizona for female entrepreneurs and professionals called Collab Culture.
That's awesome. That's so cool how you went through different stages and just found what you liked.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Haley, what are some of the ways to grab people's attention and draw them in to listen to your message?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about showing up, whether it's in social media or in email marketing, or even when you're interacting with people in person, I think it's really important to create a personal connection for them. So I think a lot of people struggle with if I'm a business owner, I should only be talking about my business, or if I'm, not, if I'm in my personal life stuff, I shouldn't be talking about my business. And I actually would argue the complete opposite. I think it's really important to offer people the opportunity to connect with you as a human being first. I actually was on a call yesterday with my group coaching program, and we were talking a lot about this and ways that they can incorporate just normalizing themselves as a relatable individual. So this could look as intimate as you want or as surface level as you want. So you could talk about, really deep struggles that you've struggled with and how people can connect with you in that way. Or you could just talk about how you only drink iced coffee and you think hot coffee is gross. Like it doesn't have to be anything specific, but I think finding ways where people can relate to you where they're like, oh, I only like iced coffee too. Or, I have three daughters personally. So maybe they're like, oh, I'm a girl mom. Like I can totally relate to that. And finding those little nuggets where people can feel like they would be friends with you in real life or they can relate to you, that creates that attention grabbing kind of magnet energy where then they're more inclined to be in tuned with all of the other things that you have to say.
Yeah, they get to see the real you as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any strategies that tend to work better than others?
I think for me, it's using your voice. And
Yeah.
so allowing people to just hear you talk in the way that you normally would do that. And so whether that is through storytelling in your email or whether that's through showing up face to camera on social media, I think there's something to be said for that emotional connection that's created when people are able to hear your voice or sense what your voice would sound like. So on my email list, specifically, I do a lot of storytelling in my emails. I talk about random things and then tie them back to something of value. And sometimes it's simply just sharing, like, hey, I had a hard day today. This is what I was dealing with. Maybe you've struggled with this too. And so I think allowing people, again, to hear your voice and feel that personal connection with you is the most beneficial and the highest converting as far as getting people really engaged with reading your content regularly.
Yeah. How important is it to know your target audience when you're trying to attract a crowd?
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. I do think it's important. I think it's important to know who your target audience is, but I do think a lot of people go very extreme where they have pigeonholed themselves in this super, super tight box. And if it doesn't fit this tight box, they just don't know what to do with themselves. And
Yeah.
so I do think it's important to have a general idea of who your message is for and who it is not for. And the big reason for that is it allows us to have less weight on ourselves when our message doesn't resonate with someone because it's usually somebody who isn't our target audience anyways. And so it's easier to just like take it less personally where you're like, "Oh, it was never for them in the first place, so that's
Yeah.
okay." So yeah, I do think it's important, and I always encourage people to get very clear on identifying who they are trying to speak to and who their message is intended for, in whatever capacity makes sense for them and their business. And that's going to look different for everybody, right? Like, so for my community, like my collab culture community, we have a very specific, we're local. So we're not necessarily speaking to people living in Kansas, right? Like our community is based in Arizona, it's in person. So our demographic is hyper local. It's female entrepreneurs and professionals,
Yeah,
usually around like 30 to 50. And those are kind of like the target markers for our demographic versus in my coaching business. I do stuff virtually and in person. I do stuff
yeah,
with women only, and I do stuff that's co-ed. So it's a little more flexible on that side, if that makes sense.
yeah. So what are some ways to find out what your audience wants and tailor your message to meet their needs?
You just ask them. I
Yeah,
know it sounds so silly, but ask them. Again, on my coaching call yesterday, we were having this conversation about there's no sense in spinning your wheels trying to create something that people may not even want. And
yeah,
so we have this free resource at our fingertips where we can be just asking our people, what is it that you want? What are you excited about? What are you wanting to hear from, or, hear about from me? Or what, for me, because I do a lot of events, like what kind of events would you guys be interested? I'm doing an event coming up in March that is a like content day,
mhm,
and it's a series called The Table that I host. That's for community builders locally. And so we do these different types of events, and normally it's a dinner, but somebody had mentioned like, hey, it would be cool, or they had done within their community a content day. And I was like, that would be super fun, but I don't know if people would want it. And so before putting all this time and energy into planning it, I just asked. I went on my email
yeah.
list, I went on media and said, hey, would anyone locally be interested in this? And there was an overwhelming response of yes. And I was like, okay, we'll move forward and do it then.
I love that. How can you use social media and other digital platforms to build buzz around your events or messages?
I think just again, consistency of showing up regularly and allowing people to feel like they can see themselves in the room. So that can be done through storytelling, that can be done through creating actual visual cues for people. So whether that's like behind the scenes B-roll, that's photos from previous events, or even stock images of photos that kind of emulate the look and vibe that you're wanting to go towards. Whenever I look for events that I'm going to attend, I'm always hooked by like good video content,
Yeah,
whether it's pictures or it's pictures with like a voiceover with somebody talking about their experience at one of their events or what they can expect, I think is really huge. We used a strategy in a retreat launch recently for Collab Culture. We do an annual mastermind retreat, and we use a strategy through email where we did it in like a teaser format. And so we put this photo out that was kind of the graphic for the retreat, and it had 8 different photos on it. And then we didn't give them a lot of details. We gave them the location and the dates and how many spots were going to be available. We didn't tell them how much it was. We didn't tell them what all was included. And then over the course of the next week, we dripped out emails, and each email only unlocked one of those 8 little pieces. So it was giving them like a little teaser, but
mhm,
like not giving everything at once. And I think that was really effective because it really, the format of the emails was more storytelling and really tapping into like that emotional complex.
yeah,
And so it allowed us to create and paint a picture for them of what that experience would actually look like before we dropped the link for the tickets, before we told them how much it was, before any of those pieces. So I would say again, like tapping into emotional connection, visuals, storytelling, those are going to be really, really effective, whether you're in podcasting, whether you are in email, blog, social media, any of the places that you're showing up. I think those for me have been most effective.
yeah. Are there any tried and true techniques for engaging an audience and keeping them interested throughout the whole presentation or performance?
Yeah, like if you're giving, you mean if you're in like teaching a workshop or something like
Yeah.
that? Yeah, I would say creating like opportunities for them to interact with it. And so having it be highly interactive, whether you're asking questions and they're raising their hand, or whether you are putting them into small groups. Like at our meetings, we have everybody sitting at round tables. And so a lot of speakers will say, hey, for the next 3 minutes amongst your table, I want you guys to discuss this question.
Yeah.
Think that that is really huge, and just making it interactive rather than like a lecture style where you're just like talking the entire time and everyone's just sitting listening. I think in that format, it's really easy for people to tune out, especially if you're virtual. We're prone to like, oh, my phone's here, or I'm going to have a snack or whatever. And we're prone to like get distracted by other things.
Yeah. So how can you handle distractions or difficult audience members?
Yeah, I think again, like just what I said in the last one, I think having opportunities for them to be engaged. And it also is a bit of an accountability thing too, where they're like, oh, they're going to ask something of me, or I need to be paying attention. I don't want to be caught off guard. Creating those opportunities for them to stay engaged. And whether that's interactive elements, whether that's, oh, hey, we're going to be journaling for the next 5 minutes on this topic, then we're going to come back and we're going to share, making sure that it is really resonating with them throughout the presentation. Like, hey, say you're on Zoom and you make a statement, and you can say things like, you know, if that resonated with you, or if you can relate, put a 1 in the chat, or drop something in the chat, an example of fill in the blank. And again, just offering opportunities for it to be highly interactive, I think eliminates as much distraction as possible. I mean, we're in a highly distracted society, so you can't get away from it completely, but also setting the expectation. I think that's fair. And sometimes I think we're going to hurt people's feelings by being a little more forward. But I've done that plenty of times where I'll say, like, hey, you know, out of respect for the speaker or, you know, the people sharing, we're going to go ahead and ask that everybody puts their phones away. If it's an emergency and you need to step away, please, you know, just go ahead and grab your phone and step outside and handle whatever it is. And I think people appreciate that.
Yeah. What can we learn from successful crowd drawing events and how we can apply the lessons to our own work?
I think events are huge. I think offering people an opportunity to connect with other people is honestly a huge gift, and it's something that I absolutely love to do. I literally do it
Yeah.
every single week between both businesses. I think utilizing events allows you the opportunity to obviously be in front of people, but also create connections and be that servant leader to other people where you can like physically connect people together. And I just think, especially after the last couple of years, people are just really, really craving connection in general. So, any way we can offer an opportunity for them to do that, we then become such a resource and a gift to them in that capacity. And it allows you to be front of mind for them in other things in the future, because they know, you know, you're willing to help and you're a good
Yeah.
connector and you know people and all of those things. And so it creates a really beautiful opportunity for a relationship with others.
What are some ways of benefits of successfully, building community?
Ooh, this I could talk about for literally like 5 hours. But I'll try to keep it brief. Community is everything. And I will literally scream it from the rooftops, whether it is, you know, when you're young and you're figuring out who your friends are going to be and who are the people that you trust or the people that you go to with hard questions. And then as you get older and, you know, you go into college and then you go into going to live out on your own and really relying on your people to be able to help support you. And then you become, you know, a mom or a wife or whatever those things are. I literally feel like I have been blessed with community in every aspect of life. And I just think it's so essential. We were literally designed, humans were literally designed to do life
Yeah.
in community. And I think there is just so much power in creating that infrastructure and network in your life, because we're not meant to do things alone. And I think that it's really overlooked, because I think a lot of people have gotten into this hustle culture where they're grinding, they're, working so hard, and that's great, but it doesn't have to be that hard. If you actually spent half of that time just cultivating really purpose-filled, deeper relationships, that then becomes the fuel that will funnel into your business and grow it 10 times faster than you as a one-person show trying to like hustle and do all the things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly think that it's huge. And I think it's a massive opportunity, whether it's in your personal life or it's in business, to create so much expansion if you are willing to put in the work. I think that's the key, I would say, above everything, is like it's a bi-directional exchange. So
Yeah.
it has to be you giving if others are going to be giving, rather than you just showing up and saying, I'm here, I did this, give me all
Yeah.
the things. Like that's not it either.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Community is a main thing for me as well, because that's how I was founded. That's why I do what I do. And so, that's why you're here. That's why so many people on my podcast are here, because I have slowly built community, and it's my favorite part about doing these things.
Yeah.
How can you create a compelling narrative to draw in your audience?
I think again, it just goes back to using your story and using your voice and allowing people to see themselves in your words. So whether that is sharing things that you're struggling with, sharing ways that you can help, painting the picture of, this is what you may be struggling with now, and this is how I help, and this is what life could look like on the other side of that. There's so many different ways, but I think creating that emotional connection for people where it's almost a mirror effect, where they can see themselves within your story, and really using that strategy, I think is huge. And I just think it makes you more relatable, right? Rather than just being like, buy my thing, buy my thing, buy my thing. Like it's not the vibe.
What are some creative ways to promote your podcast or your business or your events?
Leveraging community, leveraging other people and other similar networks. And so we do this a lot with events, or with, I'm getting ready to launch my podcast, and really, thank you, and really tapping into how do we find these like audiences that are similar,
Yeah.
and we may serve them in a different capacity or a different way, or we may do the same thing, but there's benefit for both of us to be cross promoting. I obviously host a ton of events through the West Collective and through Collab Culture, but I go to a ton of events.
Yeah.
And like this month alone, I think I'm going to either like 4 or 5 events for other communities that
Yeah.
are local in Arizona. And I think there's great opportunity there to use, your network to create hype and excitement about things, and they become a trusted source, right? Like I'm just making this up, like if your best friend comes to you and is like, oh my gosh, like have you heard about this thing? I'm so excited. She's amazing, blah, 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 blah. You're automatically bought in because you trust your best friend, you trust her judgment. And so it creates that lower barrier to entry for people where you're already vetted by somebody else, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How important is consistency in releasing a different social media posts and other events,
Yeah.
advertisements?
I think consistency is a relative term. So I think has to be consistency for you. For some people, like especially like your bigger influencers and things like that, consistency is every single day. They're in stories 100 times a day. They're in their feed every day. But consistency for the lay normal person, right, is maybe like
Yeah.
3 times a week or something like that. So I always encourage people when I talk to them to really hold yourself accountable and set a goal and hold yourself to it. So if consistency for you is showing up twice a week, then make that commitment, but actually do it. If it's, I'm going to do, one podcast episode a week, commit to that and actually do it. I would much, much rather people set a goal that's attainable, that they can consistently hit, rather than go all out and say, I'm going to post every day. And then they make it like 1 week and then they don't post again for 3 months.
Yeah. What are some common mistakes to avoid when starting a business community?
I think the biggest thing that I would say is making it too much about you. So that's both ways, in a self-serving way of making it this your individual platform for reaching people. And also on the flip side, making it too much about you also creates an unnecessary amount of stress and weight on your own shoulders, because we're holding ourselves accountable to be responsible for honestly far more than we need to. So I think that is a huge mistake that I see people making their messaging really unclear. So it's drawing in people. So if we use Collab as an example, our kind of tagline is community over competition, which I know you probably see all over the place, but literally it's in all of our stuff. It's in all of our branding. It's, if you go to our website, it's right at the header. It says community over competition. It is in everything that we do. And I am so passionate about making sure that is articulated everywhere. And so I'll get DMs from people with questions like, well, how many leads am I going to get? Or how many other real estate agents are there? Or, these things that are a little bit of like a yellow flag. And so I'll have a conversation with them very like with love and grace and kindness, but also firmness to say, here we are about community over competition. We believe strongly that there is plenty for everyone and we rise together. If that resonates with you, we would love to extend an invitation for you to come check it out. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. And so I think making sure those like elements of your community are really, really clear. And so it is drawing in the right people. So it's too much about you, making your messaging unclear. And then the last one I would say is getting hung up in details that don't matter. So a lot of people get very fixated on, well, should we have food, and what kind of food should we have, and what time of day, and what if we pick a Wednesday and then people can't do a Wednesday, and what if we what platform are we going to host it in? And they get caught up in like, not that you don't need to know those things, but it should not be debilitating, because you can always change it, and B, if it's important enough for people and they feel connected to you and your mission, they're going to make it work. So those are the 3 things that I would say people get hung up on a lot. And I really try to encourage them to not, because it can really be the make or break for the launch and the success of your community long term.
Yeah. How can you engage with your listeners and build community around your business? Doing events, what you do?
Yeah. So for events, I really have been fortunate to have an absolutely amazing community of people that thinking about them all the time and are sharing with their friends. And I really try to make sure that there is immense value that people are walking away with. So one of the things that I started doing for my own personal in-person events is creating a like follow-up email that has a list of everybody that was in the room. So it has a list of their names, their business, their Instagram handle or email address, kind of depends on the event, what is most relevant. But I send that out in the follow-up email. I thank them for coming. I ask them for their feedback, which is huge, because I think a lot of people don't do that. And it's a missed opportunity, because I've actually gotten some really good feedback that is, critical in quotes, for lack of a better term, not in a nasty way, but it's like, hey, have you thought about this? And it just gave me a different perspective shift I maybe wouldn't have already considered. And so I do that follow-up email, ask for feedback, thank them for coming. Tell them I hope that they're going to be able to come to the next one. And then sending that resource is like a tangible, like a party favor. It's like, hey, thanks for coming. And here is the list for this event so that you can make more intentional connections beyond the room that I've curated for you.
Yeah. How do you choose the right guests for your community events?
Same thing, just calling in with the messaging, who it's for, speaking very clearly to what it is, what it isn't, who it's for, who it's not for. You may run into situations where people end up in the room that you can clearly see are not a good fit.
Yeah.
But I think they almost have to make that self-selection to say this isn't the room for me, because obviously we're very inclusive. I want anyone who feels aligned with my
Yeah.
message and what we're all about and our mission. I want them to be in the room. I want them to have a seat. But if it's not for you, only you can choose that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
truth be told, we've never had this situation, but if I felt super strongly that somebody was attending events or was in a community that I was part of facilitating that was toxic in any way, was creating a lot of trouble, or was just very misaligned, I would absolutely have that conversation with them
Yeah.
and just really be honest to say, I just don't think this is a good fit for you. Again, I've been very fortunate to not have to do that, but I wouldn't be against doing it if I had to.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I got a lot of wisdom out of it, and I really enjoyed topic with you. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it, and I hope the best to your communities and all the stuff that you do. It's really amazing, and I really look up to it. It's really cool to see all the things you've done and accomplished.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You too.